In the mists of ancient Japan, when mountain peaks touched the clouds and cherry blossoms danced on spring winds, there emerged a class of warriors whose very name would echo through the centuries. The samurai, meaning those who serve, first appeared in the shadows of the 9th and 10th centuries, born from the need to protect the vast estates of noble families in a land where central authority had grown weak. These were not mere soldiers, but something far more profound. They were the embodiment of a way of life that would shape an entire civilization. In the rolling hills and fertile valleys of feudal Japan, where rice paddies stretched like mirrors reflecting the sky, the samurai carved out their destiny with sword and spirit. They served their lords with unwavering devotion, bound by invisible chains of honor stronger than any iron forged in the furnaces of their swordsmiths. The feudal system that birthed them was like a great tree, with the emperor as its sacred root, the shogun as its mighty trunk, and the daimyo as its spreading branches. Upon these branches perched the samurai, like proud hawks ready to soar at their master's command. They were the military nobility, the warrior poets who would defend their domains with their lives and celebrate beauty with their souls. To be born a samurai was to inherit both privilege and burden, for the warrior's path was carved into one's very bones. In the paper-walled houses where sliding doors whispered secrets to the wind, samurai children learned from their first breath that they belonged to something greater than themselves. The wooden floors that creaked beneath their small feet had been walked by generations of warriors before them. A samurai boy's education began before he could properly hold a brush to write his name. His father would place a tiny wooden sword in his infant hands, and his mother would sing him lullabies of ancient heroes who chose death before dishonor. By the age of 5, he would begin learning the fundamental strokes of swordsmanship, his small arms guided by patient instructors who had survived countless battles. The concept of giri, or duty, was woven into every lesson like golden thread through silk. A young samurai learned that his obligations extended in all directions, upward to his lord, downward to his retainers, sideways to his brothers in arms, and inward to his own spirit. These duties were not chains, but wings, lifting him above the mundane concerns of ordinary men. When a samurai boy reached his 15th year, he would undergo the sacred ceremony of genpuku, his coming of age. On this day, surrounded by the burning incense and flickering candles of ancestral shrines, he would receive his first real sword and take his adult name. The weight of the blade in his hands was nothing compared to the weight of expectation that now rested upon his shoulders. Deep in the heart of every true samurai lived an invisible fire, kindled by the ancient code known as Bushido, the way of the warrior. This was not a written law carved in stone, but a living philosophy that flowed like water through every aspect of their existence. It was born from the marriage of 3 great traditions: the discipline of Zen Buddhism, the social harmony of Confucianism, and the spiritual reverence of Shinto. Loyalty was the first pillar of this code, standing tall and unshakable as Mount Fuji itself. A samurai's loyalty to his lord was absolute, transcending even the love for his own family. Stories were told in hushed voices of warriors who followed their masters into death, choosing to perform seppuku rather than outlive the one they served. This ritual suicide was not seen as a tragedy, but as the ultimate flowering of the warrior spirit, a final poem written in blood and honor. Courage flowed through their veins like liquid steel, but it was not the wild bravery of berserkers. Samurai courage was refined, controlled, like the precise movements of their sword techniques. They faced death not with reckless abandon, but with calm acceptance, knowing that today was as good a day to die as any other. In the quiet moments before battle, they would compose haiku, capturing the beauty of cherry blossoms or morning dew, understanding that such beauty was made precious by its impermanence. The relationship between a daimyo and his samurai was sacred, built upon mutual respect and unwavering trust. The lord provided rice stipends, protection, and purpose. The samurai offered their skills, their loyalty, and, if necessary, their lives. This bond could not be broken by distance or time, and even death could not fully sever its invisible threads. When the drums of war fell silent and swords rested in their scabbards, the samurai's life revealed itself in all its complex beauty. They lived in modest elegance, their homes reflecting the aesthetic principles that govern their souls. Tatami mats covered floors worn smooth by generations of feet, and sliding paper screens filtered sunlight into gentle golden rays that danced across polished wood. A samurai's economic life was both secure and precarious. His rice stipend from his lord provided stability, measured not in coins but in koku, the amount of rice needed to feed a man for a year. Yet this security came with strings attached, for he could not engage in trade or commerce without losing face. His hands, trained to wield weapons with deadly precision, learned instead to hold brushes for calligraphy and tea whisks for the sacred ceremony. Family life followed ancient patterns, with marriages arranged to strengthen clan alliances and produce strong heirs. A samurai wife was expected to embody the same virtues as her husband: courage, loyalty, and self-discipline. She managed the household, raised the children, and prepared herself to die, defending the family honor if circumstances demanded it. Their children played with wooden swords and listened to stories of heroic ancestors, their young minds already being shaped for the paths they would follow. In times of peace, many samurai became administrators, poets, scholars, and artists. They studied the Chinese classics, practiced calligraphy until their brushstrokes flowed like water, and cultivated gardens where every stone and plant had meaning. The tea ceremony became their meditation, each movement precise and purposeful, each sip of bitter green tea a reminder of life's fleeting nature. The soul of the samurai was forged in the crucible of combat training, where every dawn brought new lessons in the ancient arts of war. In courtyards swept clean by morning mists, young warriors practiced kata, their movements as graceful as dancing cranes and as deadly as striking serpents. The way of the sword was not merely about killing. It was about achieving perfect harmony between mind, body, and spirit. The katana, that curved masterpiece of steel and fire, was more than a weapon. It was the samurai's soul made manifest. Swordsmiths worked for months to create each blade, folding steel upon itself thousands of times, each fold adding strength and creating the flowing patterns that marked true craftsmanship. The sword's edge was sharp enough to cut through silk scarves floating on the wind, yet flexible enough to bend without breaking. Beside the katana hung the shorter wakizashi, and together they formed the daisho, the symbols of samurai status that no other class was permitted to wear. In battle, samurai warriors became terrible angels of death, their armor gleaming like beetle shells in the sun. Each piece of their equipment had been crafted with loving care: the kabuto helmet with its fearsome face mask, the do breastplate that could turn aside arrows and spear thrusts, and the flowing war banners that identified them to friend and foe alike. They rode into combat on horses trained for war, beasts as proud and disciplined as their masters. The reality of medieval warfare was brutal and swift. Samurai called out their names and lineages before engaging in single combat, for honor demanded that worthy opponents know whom they faced. Arrows whistled through the air like deadly birds, and the clash of steel on steel rang across valleys where farmers' children would find arrowheads decades later, buried treasures of forgotten conflicts. There came a time when the samurai class reached the height of their power and influence, during the Kamakura and Muromachi periods, when warrior rulers governed from seats of military might. The Hojo regents and Ashikaga shoguns relied upon their samurai retainers to maintain order across the islands, and in return granted them lands and authority over the common people. But as seasons change, so too did the fortunes of the warrior class. The Sengoku period brought an age of constant warfare, when ambitious daimyo carved up Japan like pieces on a game board. It was an era of brilliant military leaders. Oda Nobunaga, who embraced new technologies and crushed traditional ways. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who rose from peasant origins to unite much of the country. And Tokugawa Ieyasu, whose patience and cunning would establish a dynasty that lasted over 2 centuries. The irony of the samurai's success was that it contained the seeds of their transformation. When Tokugawa established his shogunate in Edo, he brought peace to a war-weary land. Swords that had tasted blood for generations were sheathed, and warriors found themselves becoming bureaucrats and administrators. The Edo period stretched ahead like a long, peaceful dream, but dreams have a way of ending when the sun rises. During these peaceful centuries, the samurai evolved from warriors into a hereditary class of civil servants. They still wore their swords and maintained their training, but their skills grew rusty from disuse. Some embraced scholarship and the arts, becoming the cultural guardians of their society. Others grew restless, their warrior spirits confined by the very peace their ancestors had fought to achieve. The ending came not with the clash of swords, but with the arrival of black ships from distant shores. When Commodore Perry's fleet appeared in 1853, demanding that Japan open its borders to foreign trade, it became clear that the old ways could not survive in a rapidly changing world. The samurai class, which had defined itself through centuries of service and sacrifice, found itself facing obsolescence. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 brought sweeping changes that swept away the foundations of samurai existence. The new government, determined to modernize Japan, declared that all men were equal before the law. The exclusive right to carry swords was abolished, rice stipends were converted to government bonds, and Western-style conscript armies replaced the hereditary warrior class. Some samurai adapted to these changes, becoming merchants, teachers, and government officials. Others could not accept the transformation of everything they held sacred. The Satsuma Rebellion of 1877 represented their final stand, when Saigo Takamori led traditional samurai against the modern imperial army. The sight of samurai charging with swords against rifles and artillery was both magnificent and tragic, the death song of an entire way of life. When the last rebel samurai fell at the Battle of Shiroyama, an era that had lasted nearly 1,000 years came to an end. Their world of honor and duty, of cherry blossoms and steel, of poetry and warfare, passed into memory like morning mist dissolving before the rising sun. Yet death is not always the end of the story. The spirit of the samurai lived on in the hearts and minds of the Japanese people, woven so deeply into their cultural fabric that it could never be completely removed. The values they championed, Loyalty, honor, self-discipline, and the pursuit of excellence became part of the national character, influencing everything from business practices to artistic expression. In the centuries that followed, the samurai became legends, their stories retold in countless forms. Kabuki actors brought their dramas to life on wooden stages, their painted faces expressing the eternal struggles between duty and desire. Later, filmmakers would capture their image in black and white, then in blazing color, sharing their tales with audiences around the world who found themselves drawn to these warriors who chose honor over life. The way of the samurai offered lessons that transcended time and culture. Their commitment to continuous self-improvement, their acceptance of responsibility, and their ability to find beauty in the face of mortality spoke to universal human aspirations. Modern leaders studied their strategies, artists drew inspiration from their aesthetics, and ordinary people found courage in their example. In quiet temples where incense still burns before ancestral tablets, in gardens where stones and sand create patterns of eternal beauty. In the precise movements of martial artists who practice forms unchanged for centuries, the spirit of the samurai endures. They live on not as historical curiosities, but as reminders of what human beings can achieve when they dedicate themselves completely to something greater than their individual desires. Their story reminds us that true strength comes not from the sword, but from the spirit that guides it, and that the greatest victories are often won not on battlefields but in the quiet moments when we choose honor over convenience, duty over comfort, and beauty over mere survival. In this way, the way of the warrior becomes a path that anyone can walk, regardless of the century in which they are born or the challenges they face. And so the samurai sleep peacefully in their ancient graves, knowing that their deepest teachings have taken root in countless hearts, growing like cherry trees that bloom each spring, beautiful in their brief flowering, eternal in their return.